Karen shouted, "You can't talk to me like that." What Judge Judy said next didn't just silence her. It exposed a secret so devastating that Karen's lawyer tried to stop the cameras. But it was too late. 42 million people were already watching. And what happened in the next 8 minutes would become the most viral courtroom moment in television history. Because hidden in Karen's designer purse wasn't just lipstick and car keys, it was evidence of something she never wanted the world to see. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. In the stale, recycled air of Studio 5 at Sunset Bronson Studios in Los Angeles, tension coiled like a serpent ready to strike. This wasn't the majestic marble halls of a federal courthouse. This was Judge Judy's domain, a television soundstage dressed to look like justice but where real consequences still landed with the weight of a gavel. The overhead lights hummed with electric anticipation, casting harsh shadows across the wood-paneled walls that had witnessed thousands of liars, cheaters, and entitled souls march to their reckoning. Camera operators adjusted their lenses with surgical precision, their red recording lights blinking like predatory eyes in the darkness beyond the set. This wasn't just another episode scheduled for a lazy afternoon time slot. The production crew could feel it, that rare electricity that meant something explosive was about to detonate, and their job was to capture every frame of the fallout. The gallery was packed beyond capacity, not with the usual studio audience members bussed in from tourist hotels, promised a free lunch and a brush with daytime television fame. No, these were people who had called in favors, pulled strings, and camped outside the studio at 4 a.m. because word had leaked through the legal grapevine that today's case was special. Law students clutched notebooks with white knuckles, their pens poised to document what their professors could never teach them. Paralegal firms had sent representatives to watch what happens when entitlement meets accountability at 100 miles per hour. Social media managers sat in the back rows, phones angled perfectly to capture content their brands would kill for. Fingers hovering over record buttons like gunslingers ready to draw. Even the bailiff, a man who had stood stone-faced through everything from screaming matches to fainting fits, kept glancing toward the door with an expression that suggested he knew something different was walking through it today. Karen entered the courtroom like a hurricane, convinced it was a gentle breeze. Her heels, Louboutin, red-soled, clicking with the confidence of someone who had never been told no by anyone who mattered, announced her arrival 3 seconds before her perfume did. The scent was expensive, aggressive, the kind that doesn't ask for space but takes it. Her athleisure outfit cost more than most people's monthly rent. Designer leggings that probably required a waiting list. A cashmere wrap that draped with calculated casualness, and sunglasses. Gucci, oversized, perched on top of bleached hair styled into that particular shade of blonde that screams, "I'd like to speak to your manager," before a single word leaves the mouth. She carried a purse the size of a small suitcase, designer label facing outward like a shield, stuffed with what appeared to be her entire life. Wallet, phone, makeup bag, and something else she kept touching nervously, checking to make sure it was still there. Her friend trailed behind her, phone already out, recording everything with the dedication of someone documenting what they believed would be Karen's triumphant victory lap. Karen smiled as she approached the plaintiff's table. Not a warm smile, not a nervous smile, but that particular expression of someone who has weaponized customer service, complaints into an art form, and fully expects the universe to bend to her volume setting. She scanned the room, with the assessment of a general surveying a battlefield she'd already won. Her eyes lingered on the cameras and something flickered across her face. Satisfaction, maybe even hunger. She wanted this televised. She wanted her righteous indignation broadcast into living rooms across America. She had prepared for this moment, practiced her victim speech in the mirror, rehearsed the exact tone of wounded dignity she would deploy when she explained how she had been wronged by people clearly beneath her tax bracket. Karen took her position behind the defendant's podium, arranging her designer purse just so, tilting her chin upward in that universal posture of someone who has confused confidence with evidence. 12 feet to her left stood the plaintiff, Marcus Chen, a 34-year-old small business owner whose auto body shop in Koreatown had been his father's before him and his grandfather's before that. Marcus wore a simple button-down shirt, pressed but not expensive, and slacks that had seen multiple dry cleanings but still served their purpose. No designer labels, no power accessories, just a manila folder clutched in slightly trembling hands, containing photographs, receipts, witness statements, and the kind of meticulous documentation that comes from a life spent proving yourself in a world that doesn't hand you the benefit of the doubt. His eyes carried the exhaustion of someone who had spent 3 months trying to get Karen to simply pay for the damage she'd caused to his shop's front window. $1,200 in repairs that might as well have been $1 million for all the sleepless nights it had cost him. He'd almost given up. Almost decided that tangling with someone like Karen, someone with resources and rage and a vocabulary that included the phrase, "I'll sue you," wasn't worth the stress. But his wife had said something that changed his mind. If you don't stand up now, you'll spend the rest of your life stepping aside. So here he stood, folder in hand, heart hammering, trying not to look at Karen's smirk. And then there was Judge Judy. She sat elevated on the bench, but somehow it wasn't the height that created her authority. It was the stillness. While Karen fidgeted and preened, while Marcus fought to steady his breathing, Judge Judy simply existed in a state of complete, unshakable calm. Her black robe hung without a wrinkle, her reading glasses perched low on her nose, and her eyes, those famous unflinching eyes that had dissected 20,000 cases and found the lie in every single one that contained a lie, scanned the paperwork before her with the focus of a surgeon reviewing X-rays before a complex operation. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her face held the expression of someone who had heard every excuse, every justification, every sob story, and every indignant denial that the human mind could manufacture, and had stopped being impressed by theatrics somewhere around case number 47. Judge Judy was the underdog in the room, and she knew it. Not in power, never in power within these four walls, but in the war of perception that raged beyond the cameras. Karen had social media followers. Karen had friends recording for her defense. Karen had the armor of entitlement, the shield of never having faced real consequences, the weapon of a voice that had been raised in countless Starbucks and Target stores until managers gave her what she wanted, just to make her leave. Judge Judy had none of that currency. She had something Karen didn't understand. Decades of seeing through exactly this kind of performance and zero interest in applause. She wasn't here to win a popularity contest. She was here to read the evidence, hear the truth, and deliver a verdict that wouldn't care about Instagram followers or how many times someone claimed to know the owner. The bailiff stepped forward, his voice cutting through the charged atmosphere. Case number 47739, Marcus Chen versus Karen Whitmore. Plaintiff is suing for property damage in the amount of $1,200. Defendant denies all liability. The words were routine, procedural, the kind of legal boilerplate that opened 1,000 small claims cases. But the room understood. This was no ordinary dispute about a broken window. This was about something far more fundamental. This was about whether volume could defeat evidence, whether entitlement could outlast documentation, whether a person who had never been told no could survive 3 minutes under the gaze of someone who didn't care about their feelings, only their facts. Judge Judy looked up from her papers. She didn't look at Marcus first, despite him being the plaintiff. She looked directly at Karen, and for just a moment something passed between them. A recognition, perhaps. Karen saw a judge who would need to be managed, manipulated, convinced. Judge Judy saw a case she'd witnessed 10,000 times before, wearing a different designer outfit but speaking the exact same language of deflection. The judge's eyes flicked to the oversized purse Karen kept touching. Then back to Karen's face. Then to the papers. Then she did something unusual. She picked up a red pen, circled something on page 3 of the filing documents, and underlined it twice. Hard enough that people in the front row could hear the pen scratching against paper. The room wasn't quiet. It was hushed, a distinction that separates peace from tension holding its breath. People shifted in their seats with exaggerated care, afraid their movement might trigger the explosion everyone could sense building. The camera operators leaned in imperceptibly, instinct telling them to tighten their shots. Marcus Chen gripped his folder tighter, knuckles going white. Karen adjusted her sunglasses one more time, even though she'd already taken them off and placed them on the podium. And Judge Judy, reading glasses now removed and set down with deliberate finality, folded her hands and looked up at the two people standing before her. "Before we begin," Judge Judy said, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone about to say something that would matter, "I want to make something clear." She paused, letting the weight settle. "I've read both sides of this case. I've seen the evidence Mr. Chen brought. I've seen what Ms. Whitmore filed, or more accurately, what she didn't file." Karen's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. "So let's save ourselves some time. If you came here thinking you could raise your voice loud enough to drown out the facts, you're in the wrong room." Judge Judy's eyes locked onto Karen with the precision of a heat-seeking missile. "If you came here thinking I care about your feelings more than his evidence, you've misunderstood what a courtroom is." The judge leaned forward slightly. "And if you came here thinking you can tell me what I can and can't say to you, well." The smallest hint of something that might have been a smile touched the corner of Judge Judy's mouth. "We're about to test that theory. Mr. Chen, tell me what happened." The clock on the wall ticked forward. Karen's hand moved to her purse again, that nervous checking gesture making sure whatever was inside stayed hidden. But the cameras had noticed. The audience had noticed. And Judge Judy, whose job for 25 years had been noticing what people tried to hide, had definitely noticed. The case was about to begin, but everyone in the room understood. The real battle had already started the moment Karen walked through that door thinking her usual tactics would work here. Because what Karen didn't know, what she couldn't have known until it was too late, was that Judge Judy wasn't just any judge tired of entitled behavior. She was the judge who had built a career on being the last person to ever back down. And in her courtroom, volume had never, not once, defeated evidence. This was going to be a masterclass, and Karen had just enrolled without reading the syllabus. Marcus Chen's voice cracked on the first word, then steadied as muscle memory from 3 generations of customer service took over. Your Honor, on March 14th, the defendant backed her vehicle into the front window of my auto body shop. Full speed, shattered the entire plate glass. He opened his manila folder with hands that had stopped shaking the moment Judge Judy gave him permission to speak. I have photographs from 3 angles, a police report, 2 witness statements from customers who were inside the shop, and repair estimates from 2 different glass companies. Both quotes came in at $200. He slid the evidence across to the bailiff, who carried it to Judge Judy's bench, like he was transporting nitroglycerin. Judge Judy examined each photograph, with the methodical precision of someone reading an X-ray. Her eyes moved from image to evidence to report, cross-referencing without speaking. 30 seconds of silence that felt like 30 minutes. Then she looked up at Marcus. Were you present when this happened? Marcus nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I watched it happen through the showroom window. Judge Judy made a note. Did she stop immediately? Marcus paused, remembering that moment, the sound of shattering glass still echoing in his nightmares. No, Your Honor. She reversed, looked at the damage, then drove away. I had to run into the street to get her license plate number before she turned the corner. The courtroom inhaled collectively. Even Karen's friend stopped recording for a second, lowering the phone in what might have been shock. Judge Judy's pen stopped moving. She looked up slowly, first at Marcus, then rotating her gaze toward Karen with the deliberate menace of a tank turret locking onto a target. Ms. Whitmore, you left the scene? Karen's entire demeanor transformed in an instant, from nervous defendant to wounded victim. Like flipping a switch she'd installed years ago and had used so many times the mechanism was frictionless. Your Honor, I didn't leave the scene. I repositioned my vehicle because there was glass everywhere and I didn't want to damage my tires. Her voice carried that particular tone of explaining something obvious to someone dim. I was going to come back inside, but he... She jabbed a finger toward Marcus. He came running at my car screaming in a language I couldn't understand, and I felt threatened. I had every right to leave a situation where I felt unsafe. Judge Judy's eyebrow rose exactly 1/4 of an inch, a movement that people who watched her show regularly knew meant someone had just made a catastrophic miscalculation. You felt threatened by the man whose property you just destroyed? Karen opened her mouth, but Judge Judy raised one finger. Don't answer yet. I'm still processing the physics of how you were positioned your vehicle after driving it through a window. The judge looked back at the police report. According to Officer Martinez, when he arrived at your residence 3 hours later, because Mr. Chen provided your plate number, you told the officer, and I quote, I don't know what he's talking about. My car has been in my garage all day. Karen's face flushed. I was confused. It had been a stressful day. I'm sure it had been, Judge Judy said, her voice dry as desert sand. Destroying property and fleeing tends to be stressful. Do you have any evidence to present? Photos of your vehicle? Proof that the damage Mr. Chen is claiming couldn't have come from your car? Karen straightened her shoulders, reached for her purse, then seemed to think better of it and withdrew her hand. I don't need evidence, Your Honor. Anyone with common sense can see this is clearly a scam. He probably broke his own window to collect insurance money and now he's trying to get paid twice. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, and for 3 long seconds simply stared at Karen with an expression that could have flash-frozen boiling water. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who had reached the absolute limit of patience with a particular brand of human behavior. Ms. Whitmore, let me explain something to you about how my courtroom works, because you seem to have confused it with a Facebook comments section. She leaned forward. In here, common sense doesn't override evidence. Your feelings don't override facts, and your voice, no matter how loud you make it, doesn't override documentation. Karen's hands gripped the podium. Are you saying you're not even going to listen to my side? I'm listening right now, Judge Judy said. I'm listening to you tell me you have no evidence, no witnesses, no photos, no documentation of any kind, and your defense is that everyone else is lying. The judge picked up the police report again. I'm also listening to Officer Martinez's report, which says when he asked you directly if you'd been involved in an accident that day, you said no. Not I was confused, not I felt threatened. You said no. Because Karen started. Because you lied, Judge Judy finished. And now you're here in my courtroom, asking me to believe that the man with photographs, witnesses, and a police report is the liar, while you, with absolutely nothing but attitude, are telling the truth. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Marcus Chen's grip on his folder loosened slightly, his breathing evening out as he watched Judge Judy do what he'd prayed someone would finally do. Refuse to let Karen's volume control the conversation. Karen's friend had raised the phone again, recording frantically, and Karen's eyes flicked to that camera like a lifeline. She was playing to an audience of future social media followers, people who would see a 60-second clip and rally to her defense against the mean judge. But Judge Judy wasn't playing to any audience. She was reading the evidence, and the evidence was painting a picture that no amount of indignation could repaint. "Do you have anything else to say, Ms. Whitmore?" Judge Judy asked. "Before I make my ruling?" Karen's mouth opened, and everyone in the courtroom, from the stenographer to the last row of the gallery, knew that what came out next would either save her or bury her. And based on everything they'd witnessed in the last 8 minutes, salvation wasn't on the menu. Karen took a breath, her hand moving once more toward that oversized purse, and said the words that would detonate everything. "You can't talk to me like that." The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. "You can't talk to me like that." Karen's voice wasn't just loud, it was seismic, echoing off the studio walls with the full force of someone who had spent a lifetime deploying that exact phrase to bend retail workers, restaurant managers, and customer service representatives to her will. Her face flushed crimson, her finger pointing at Judge Judy like a weapon she'd used 1,000 times before, and never once had it failed to make someone apologize, backtrack, offer a discount, or simply give up. She took a step forward, her designer heels clicking against the floor with the rhythm of someone advancing toward victory. "I came here for justice, not to be disrespected by someone who clearly has already made up her mind." Judge Judy didn't move, didn't blink, didn't react. She simply sat there, hands still folded on the bench, looking at Karen with the expression of someone watching a toddler throw a tantrum in a grocery store, mildly interested in an anthropological sense, but entirely unmoved by the performance. The silence that followed Karen's outburst stretched and stretched, becoming its own entity, its own presence in the room. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 8 seconds of Judge Judy simply staring while Karen's chest heaved with righteous indignation, and the cameras captured every micro-expression of someone realizing, perhaps for the first time, that the usual script wasn't working. Then Judge Judy spoke, and her voice carried the temperature of absolute zero. "Actually, I can." Those 3 words, "actually, I can," detonated like a controlled explosion. Judge Judy leaned forward, her voice dropping into that surgical tone that had dissected 1,000 egos before Karen's. "This is my courtroom. Not your living room. Not a store where you can demand a manager. Mine. And in here I don't answer to you. You answer to me." She picked up the police report, holding it like evidence at a crime scene. "You want respect? Bring evidence. You want consideration? Bring truth. You want me to take you seriously? Stop lying." Karen's mouth opened, but Judge Judy raised one finger. "I'm not finished." Judge Judy straightened the papers before her with decisive finality. "I've heard enough. Judgment for the plaintiff. What, $200 for repairs?" Karen's eyes went wide, plus court costs and filing fees. "Total, $1,485, Karen exploded. "This is insane. You didn't even listen." Judge Judy's gaze could have cut steel. "I listened to your lies, your deflections, and your complete lack of evidence. What I didn't listen to was your volume, because volume isn't proof." She banged the gavel once, sharp, final. "We're done here." Karen grabbed her purse, clutching it like a shield. "This is going viral. Everyone will see how biased you are." Judge Judy's slight smile was colder than her previous expression. "Please do post it. Post every second, because America loves watching people learn that consequences exist." Karen turned toward the exit, her heels clicking frantically against the floor, her friend trailing behind, still recording, phone shaking as she struggled to keep up. But as Karen reached for her purse to shove it under her arm, something happened that would change everything. The zipper, stressed by her aggressive grip, split open, and from inside, tumbling in slow motion that the cameras captured in perfect high definition, fell a stack of photographs, at least 30 of them, scattering across the courtroom floor like evidence raining from heaven. The bailiff moved first, instinct and training kicking in as he bent to gather them. His face changed as he looked at the first photo, then the second. Then he looked up at Judge Judy with an expression that said everything. Judge Judy's voice cut through the chaos. "Bailiff, bring those to me." Karen lunged forward. "Those are private property. You can't—" But the bailiff was already walking toward the bench, photographs in hand. Judge Judy took them, and as her eyes scanned the first image, her entire demeanor shifted from judicial satisfaction to something far more serious. "Ms. Whitmore, these are photographs of Mr. Chen's shop taken from across the street, dated 2 weeks before the incident." She looked up, her voice deadly quiet. "You were surveilling his business?" The courtroom erupted, not in noise but in that collective gasp that comes when a mystery suddenly reveals itself to be far darker than anyone anticipated. Karen stood frozen, her face draining of color. Marcus Chen's confusion transformed into horrified understanding. Judge Judy flipped through more photos. Images of Marcus arriving at work, images of his schedule, images of the shop's security camera positions. "This wasn't an accident at all, was it, Ms. Whitmore?" Judge Judy's voice carried across the stunned silence. "This was intentional, premeditated, and you came into my courtroom thinking you could lie your way through it." Karen's friend lowered the phone. Even she had stopped recording. Karen's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time since entering the courtroom, she had nothing to say. Judge Judy held up the photographs like a prosecutor presenting the smoking gun. "Bailiff, I'm ordering these photographs entered into evidence and forwarded to the district attorney's office. This isn't just a civil matter anymore." She looked at Karen with something beyond contempt, disappointment in humanity itself. "You didn't just damage property and lie about it. You planned it, documented your surveillance, and then had the audacity to come here and call him a scammer." Marcus Chen stood motionless, his manila folder forgotten, staring at the photographs with the expression of someone realizing they'd been targeted, hunted, and he'd never even known. Judge Judy's gavel came down one more time. "Ms. Whitmore, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you exercise it, because anything you say now can and will be used against you in criminal court." The courtroom cleared slowly. People moving like witnesses leaving a crime scene, unsure of what they just watched transform from small claims into something far more sinister. Marcus Chen walked out with his judgment and something more valuable: vindication. The photographs proved what he'd always suspected but could never prove. Karen hadn't accidentally hit his shop. She'd targeted it. Why? The investigation would later reveal a property dispute, a business rivalry, a grudge that had festered into obsession. But in that moment, none of the details mattered as much as the principle Judge Judy had enforced. Evidence defeats ego, every single time. Within 48 hours, the clip exploded across every platform. Not the edited version Karen had planned to post, the full footage including the photographs spilling from her purse like a confession she couldn't take back. The view count hit 42 million. News outlets called it the case that proved premeditation live on television. Legal analysts dissected it in classrooms. But the most viral moment wasn't the photographs, it was Judge Judy's 3 words: "Actually, I can." Because embedded in those words was a lesson that transcended one courtroom. One case, one entitled woman learning consequences. It was the answer to every person who'd ever been told they couldn't speak truth to power, couldn't stand up to someone louder, couldn't fight back against someone with more resources. Judge Judy, the underdog and designer authority facing social media influence, had proven something fundamental. Truth doesn't need volume. It just needs evidence. And when you have evidence, no amount of shouting can silence it. Marcus Chen later said in an interview that he almost didn't file the lawsuit. Almost decided, $100 wasn't worth facing someone like Karen. But then I remembered my father's words. If you don't stand up, you teach them they can knock anyone down. He stood up. He brought his folder. He let the evidence speak. And when Karen's purse betrayed her secrets, it wasn't luck, it was justice finding a way to surface. The way truth always does when someone refuses to let volume win. The question isn't whether you'll face someone who thinks they're above accountability. You will. The question is, will you have your evidence ready? Will you stand firm when they raise their voice? Will you remember that courtrooms, real ones, metaphorical ones, the everyday battles for fairness, don't reward the loudest person? They reward the most prepared. If this story reminded you that truth is your superpower, drop a comment sharing your moment of standing up when it mattered. Hit subscribe because we're bringing you more stories where evidence defeats ego, and smash that notification bell, because the next case we cover will show you what happens when someone thinks they can fake their way through life until they meet the one person who won't play along. Your evidence is your armor. Gather it, use it, win with it. This dramatized story is inspired by courtroom principles and accountability dynamics, created for entertainment and reflection on justice, evidence, and the power of standing firm against intimidation.